So, Bob, it's been a while since we've talked, I feel like. And so it's good to see your face, even if it's just over Zoom. So let's read emails and respond. What do you say?
I say yes. Nice to see you too.
Yeah. Patron Lara from Toronto, she says, I want some words of encouragement for those of us in another lockdown. I'm having trouble feeling sane during another lockdown here in Canada. After getting fully vaccinated and being careful throughout this whole thing, I feel that myself and many of my peers are feeling the weight of this new lockdown, in particular, as we're not supposed to leave our homes and it's minus 15 Celsius outside anyway. Could you offer some words of encouragement for your neighbors next door and other countries facing another lockdown? End of email. So just some context. This email was sent to us a while back, and right now, as the recording, it's actually Valentine's Day, the 14th of February, 2022. And in terms of areas where the government respects the science, it's still not necessarily like a mandated lockdown, but there's still a lot of measures in place. And with Omicron just raging all over the planet, but the wave is happening in different areas of the world. By the time the Omicron got to Seattle, some other places like the East Coast were already kind of recovering from Omicron. So in terms of today, it's almost like we might be seeing the end of Omicron. We might be seeing the beginning of another wave of some sort. But by the time this airs, this will be probably a week or two later after we record this, Bob. So we just have to take that in consideration. So if when you're listening to this, there are no more lockdowns. Omicron is gone. So just take that into consideration. But Bob, how have you been dealing with this most recent wave and isolation and taking all the measures? How do you feel about it emotionally?
It's sort of become the new norm to me, so I just sort of deal. It's weird to think about doing stuff like you and me, we're talking about getting together. And I noticed that it's actually weird to think about that. I've sort of adapted to not doing that.
Right.
So I'm a little bit of a introvert and a little bit of a recluse anyway. So I live here with Colleen, so like she's my support and my care and my focus. And I don't know about the person writing in. Maybe they're really lonely. I certainly could understand that. I remember single people saying that at the beginning, saying how lonely they were and how hard it was. Holidays were coming and going, and it wasn't just holidays; it was just everyday life. But it sounds like this person's really lonely too and discouraged, and I don't blame them. It makes sense to me that they would be, because it's not natural to not be in the world and not be in interaction with others. It's not the way the humans were set up, really. So hang in there.
Yeah. Spring's
coming.
Were you ever impacted negatively by the original lockdown of 2020? Were you negatively impacted by that?
I mean, far less than anybody else. And for me, actually, it had some nice positive things. Like I spent more time with Colleen.
Yeah.
At the beginning, we used to sit out in the backyard and just have happy hour and watch the birds, and every afternoon after work. And that was just a delight. So, but others were hit far harder than I was. Plus my work life is, I can do my job with the, Zoom in place, etc.
Right.
So,
yeah, it's interesting to think back. It's 2 years now, Bob.
Yeah, 2 years.
2 years. Yeah, I mean, as of, I guess, next month, March, it'll be 2 years of this. And it's so interesting to think about. Yeah, you're reminding me of all the things that I was experiencing, because I was similar to you in that there were some positives of the changes of being quarantined. One being more time with Stacy, and we got into this real routine, because her main work was as a esthetician, a skincare person, And, that ended. She stopped doing that. So, and she did some other things. She was a professional photographer as well. She stopped doing that. And so it was just home all the time. And I switched to seeing clients over the phone, and then I would podcast over Zoom. I would teach over Zoom. And so I was home all the time. I mean, I was working a lot, and then I was doing, videos and stuff and podcasting. But as soon as I was done doing something, I would open my office door and Stacy'd be right there, and we could hang out and go for a walk and hang out with the dogs, or check in and just complain about something or whatever. And no more commuting either. No more sitting in traffic. No more trying to find a parking spot in Belltown and paying for it and getting a parking ticket. I mean, there's no more being obligated to go to some stupid party you don't want to go to or something, no more spending money going to restaurants, which of course is terrible for restaurant owners and workers. But yeah, so I was getting exercise. I was getting a routine. It was kind of relaxing. It gave me time to focus on things that I wanted to focus on. So, but I will say, for me, family is a big deal, and my family getting together is a big deal. We get together for everything, for birthdays and, even Boys' Day and Girls' Day. It's a Japanese thing. Mother's Day, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's Day. We have a pretty strong tradition in my family of getting together and celebrating those moments. And we couldn't do that. That really seriously was a bummer. And then we get vaccinated, right? And suddenly we can start actually doing all these things again. And that was a whole transition, right? Just getting the vaccine and wondering, is my head going to fall off or with this experimental thing? And then, is it going to work? And, just think about that time when we all kind of started merging out, right? And you get vaccinated, and I actually was kind of yelling at you to get vaccinated.
You were.
Yeah, because I got it, and I was like, Bob, get it so we can, see each other in person and stuff. And I don't know, looking back, I think I was a little too cautious, given how horrible it ended up getting anyway, because I feel like I could have probably, because I was even avoiding seeing people outside, I was avoiding even going to outdoor activities, and I think that was probably going too far, but it was just hard to know back then. It just seemed like this wave of death and horribleness was just like right around the corner, and you had to do everything in your power to avoid being a part of that, whether a vector or a victim yourself. And anyway, but then we get vaccinated, and I just, it didn't take long before Stacy and I and you and everyone, my family, we were just all vaccinated, like completely back to normal. Restaurants, clubs, movies, trips. Well, did I go on any trips? I don't think so. Podcasting together, all the stuff. Yeah. And then, get the booster in October and Thanksgiving and Christmas. And then right around New Year's Eve was Omicron numbers were just shooting up. And so we said, well, I guess we should probably quarantine again,
Yeah.
And at that point, I kind of felt like I wanted a break from socializing, because December, there was a lot of socializing. There was a lot of seeing everyone. And so it didn't feel that bad. But now that we're like mid-February, I'm like, oh, geez, it's just so demoralizing, because and one of the psychological, so rather than me just reviewing what everyone else kind of knows, but one of the psychological elements of our potential demoralization of this is we can't predict the future.
Right.
And this is, we see this in a variety of different contexts. Like if someone has various different physical ailments that are really bothersome to them or painful or whatever, concerning, And they keep going to physician after physician, and they just don't know what it is. And then finally they get a diagnosis, and they say, well, actually, you have this, and you're going to die in 3 years. For some people, there's a relief because they have a prediction. They can now plan. They know what's going to happen to them. And it can be paradoxically relieving to find that out, because you were suffering and suffering and suffering anyway. It wasn't like you weren't suffering, but now at least you have or someone comes along and says, actually, you have this condition and it's probably just like MS, for example, and you're probably going to be living with this the rest of your life. And so for some people, just having that answer, okay, because before that, am I going to live this forever? Am I not? What's happening here? Is it going to come up? And when someone comes along and says, here is your future, it just feels so much better, even if future sucks. And so with the variants of COVID, it was, we don't know what the future holds. And no one, could have predicted Omicron. I mean, people said that the possibility is there. I mean, the longer the virus is out there, swirling through particularly unvaccinated populations, the more chance it has to mutate and thus, evade the vaccine and become more virulent, But even today, as Omicron starts to go away, there are reports of another Omicron, a different version of Omicron that is evading the vaccines, and we might be looking at another lockdown in the future, or are we not? Is this the end? Will we never in our lifetime, Bob, ever have to quarantine after this week? Or are we going to always have to quarantine for 6 months every year? And that uncertainty and just not being able to plan for the future, you can't even, I have a plan to go to California with Berto in a couple months, and I don't know if that's going to have to be canceled. And I know that's kind of a first world problem, but on another level, it's just little things. Like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to see you the next time we podcast. I don't know if I'm going to be able to see my parents for their anniversary. And it's like, it's demoralizing, because you just want to know, if they said, look, lockdown for the next 3 years, that's just how it's going to be. At least you'd be like, okay, well, let's settle in. Let's grieve the losses. But at every moment, I don't know what I'm grieving. Am I supposed to be grieving, or am I supposed to be celebrating right now? Are we getting out of this, or is this just another couple months of reprieve before we got to do it again? But for you, Bob, you kind of like lockdown, it sounds. So I don't know if I'm preaching to the choir in this moment, right?
No, it's fine. It's fine. All those things that you're saying are really common. Not knowing is painful. It's painful to not know, and to not. They heard the other day that a booster shot's effectiveness lasts for 4 months and then drops off pretty dramatically.
Right.
So.
Then I got mine 4 months ago.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. So I wonder what's going to happen with, do we all get another wave of booster shots, and then are we free to roam around relatively safely again? Yeah,
well, or do we need a completely different booster that involves Omicron, elements? I don't know. Yeah. Yeah. And I know that it's nothing. So I think another element to this for me is that when the quarantine first started 2 years ago, it seemed like that's all we could talk about. It was all that we heard about.
Yeah.
Stephen Colbert is recording from home, and
right.
half of his jokes are about COVID related, or maybe all of his jokes are about it. And it just became a part of everyone's shared experience all around the world for the most part. And then over time, vaccines, and we just stopped really thinking about it as being different enough to focus on. But I think that it's 2 years later, it almost feels like boring or old news to even bring it up. Mm-hmm. But I think that's a problem, because for some, it's, more impactful than others, but I think it's still massively a thing. People are dying.
Yeah.
Children have to wear masks, or someone in their class gets diagnosed and the entire school has to shut down. Like, it's terrifying.
Yeah.
Children are dying. People are having long COVID effects.
Right.
Studies show that your IQ drops if you get, on average.
Really?
Yeah. For those who have been diagnosed and have had COVID, perform lower on cognitive testing. Now, is that a permanent effect on their IQ? Is it a result of the stress or recovery from a medical event? You have any kind of medical event, you're going to have some cognitive decline. Or because we don't know. I mean, there's some evidence saying that for a percentage of people who get COVID, they're permanently damaged. Their nervous system, their ability to smell, their balance, their energy level, their whatever. It ravages parts. That's what it does. It your immune system will effectively get rid of it, but not before it scars certain parts of your body and harms it. So, it's not, and really this is true about any infection. Any infection can cause permanent damage. We just don't really think about it that way, right? You think you get a cold and you get over it, but any infection can cause permanent damage, in particularly certain infections that are so systemic as COVID is. But anyway, so it's still here. It's still scary. It's still demoralizing. It's still affecting our lives, and it's still horrible.
Yeah.
And for patron Lara, I never know how to pronounce it, from Toronto. I know she's told me how to pronounce it, but I never remember. But I think it's Lara, but it could be Lara. Anyway, she's just like, I don't know. I got fully vaccinated. I've been careful through this whole thing.
Yeah, right.
And
it's good.
But I still have to lock down.
Right.
And the government says that we're not supposed to leave our homes. And what am I supposed to do? And then of course you have the political fallout from all this thing. All the people just going bonkers about, someone posted this thing on Reddit where someone was saying, what was it? I can't remember, but someone was making a point that, look, do you wear a seatbelt? Because, that's the government telling you that you have to wear a seatbelt. And they'll say like, well, yeah, of course I wear a seatbelt. And it's like, well, that's what a mask is. Like, it's a government mandate to protect you. And actually it protects, different from the seatbelt that actually scientifically has been shown to lower the risk of infecting other people if you are infected. And, is there some theater to it? Like when you go to the airport, there's some security theater that is not necessarily effective, or there's certain elements of it where it's not actually going to eliminate the possibility of something dangerous happening. Sure, in terms of some masks are a lot more effective than others. Some people are extremely unlikely to, if you just had Omicron, for example, the chance of you having, if it was a month ago that you had Omicron, the chance of you getting COVID again is extremely low. Thus, is it really scientifically rational that we mandate that those people wear a mask under every circumstance? I don't know the answer to that question, but, it is a question. But, just play along. It'd sort of be like, if someone had terminal cancer and they were going to die in a week, and we're like, well, are you going to make them wear a seatbelt? Like, they're going to die anyway in a week. It's just like, well, yeah, just wear it. It's not the end of the world. It's not going to ruin your life. Like, what kind of weird brainwashing has been happening? And it's just
well,
ridiculous.
The difference is that if somebody gets diagnosed with cancer, they can't infect anybody else.
Right.
Like, we're all in this together.
Yeah.
Whatever your politics are, it doesn't really matter. We are all in this together.
Yeah. And I'm so stupid. I'm so naive, Bob, because in the beginning of this, in March of 2020, I thought, this is our World War II. The whole world. In fact, you could say it's bigger than World War II. Mm-hmm. And our stories, at least, who knows the reality, is that in 1942 in the United States, we all pulled together. Everyone did their part. There was no ambiguity. No politician was, or very few, maybe one out of 200 politicians was like, I don't care about Europe or something. And certainly there were isolationists like that. That there's some wisdom to that. It's like, why do we got to send our men to be killed? But anyway, but it wasn't like that. It was like, there's fascism spreading across the globe. Italy and the Nazis, and Japan is invading and raping and killing Chinese people and Filipino people, and so we are standing for freedom and for nonviolence, and so we will stop them, and we won't let this happen, and we will fight for the Jews. And there was no, at least maybe there were, but there wasn't a significant voice of people saying, who cares about the Jews? Who cares about Chinese people? Who cares about Polish people? Who cares about the French? Why are we doing? Who cares about people in Morocco? Like, it doesn't matter. It's all a big conspiracy. FDR is in league with Hitler. If World War II happened today, that's what would be happening. It would. Yeah. It would not. I'm not even joking. I mean, that's what would be happening. And so when this happened, in the beginning, I'm just so naive. I thought, we are going to pull, because everyone's going to be affected by this. Right. Rich, poor, everyone. No one is going to be immune to this thing. Mm-hmm. And so we're going to band together. We're going to look past our ridiculous bipartisan bullshit, because it doesn't matter. The virus kills Democrats and Republicans the same. And doctors, doctors aren't politicized. Medical profession, no one thinks the medical profession is like Republican or Democrat. They just think everyone goes to the physician, right? Like don't. When a Republican gets cancer, they go to the hospital. When a Democrat gets cancer, they go to the hospital. There's not a Republican hospital, right? And I just thought, this is going to be great. We're going to finally look past. We're going to stop fighting. Donald Trump will become a loved president because he will do what he needs. This is so easy to win as a president. You don't have to do anything. You just have to go, okay, doctors, what do we do? Let's build a team. Let's pump lots of money into the science. Let's do the right thing. Let's band together. Donald Trump could have been the best president that ever lived in our country. And he wasn't.
Far from it.
I mean, he instantly started to balk at masks and vaccines and started talking about bleach and, ivermectin and, hydro whatever. And people are just like, what do you, and so it's just, oh, Bob, I'm sure the conservative listeners have stopped listening at this point. Let's move on to another email. What do you say?
Sure.
Alyssa says, you mentioned at some point that you were able to alleviate your fears of needles on your own through exposure therapy. Can you elaborate on how to do that? I developed a weird fear of putting my contact lens in. I only have one, and it's made of glass, and it's very painful. Ouch. And I was wondering if I could do that. I don't know if I need a therapist for that, but it seems like a waste of my expensive 45-minute session to work on that when I have more pressing issues. I tried to ask my mom, who is a psychotherapist, but she doesn't really do that, and I'm too poor to see multiple therapists, and I just want to be able to see out of my left eye. Bob, so Alyssa on Discord is saying, I have a fear about putting my contact lens in, and you talked about how you got over your own fear of needles with exposure therapy. What would you recommend to Alyssa?
Well, if it were exposure therapy that Alyssa wanted to do, I'd recommend her making a list of all the things about putting in her contact lens that scare her, maybe thoughts about it, picking the lens out of the case, imagining putting it in, actually putting it in, and rank them on a scale of 0 to 100, and 100 being like, oh, this is panicking me, which Alyssa did not say. Alyssa didn't say she couldn't do it. She said she has fear about doing it.
I think she stopped doing it. She had a
okay.
longer comment that basically indicated that she just avoids it now.
Avoids it. Okay. Okay. So, and get a buddy. So basically what you do with exposure therapy is you do that list, rank your bits, and then start in the middle. Don't start low, don't start high, just start in the middle. So if opening up the contact lens is provocative, then I literally open it up and sit and look at it and keep looking at it.
Right. The principle is that you need some discomfort, but not a lot.
Yeah.
And you prolong that such that your nervous system becomes habituated to it, becomes used to it. So if thinking about putting in your contact lens gives you a 4 out of 10 distress level, then that's where you begin.
Yeah.
And you just think about it, but you have to hold it for 30 to 45 minutes. And as you hold it and you keep holding it, you repeat it, eventually the next time, I don't know, it just depends on your body, but at some point the next, so you do this maybe every day or every other day. Maybe by the 5th time you sit down to think about for half an hour about putting in your contact lens, you don't have any distress. You're a 1 out of 10. Okay. Yeah. So you're working your way up the stimulus ladder, and then the next, but unless you have to, as Bob is saying, devise your own ladder. Like at the end of at the top rung of the ladder is, I'm putting the contact in my eye. But you don't want to just go straight to that, because it could overwhelm the system and re-traumatize you, and also just be impossible to do. But I was also saying have a buddy, because a friend could be there to calm you and just be like, I'm here for you, I'm with you. How are you feeling? So for me, Alyssa, what I did with my fear, and this is just me, everyone would have to devise their own kind of regimen, but I knew that I had a ladder of the following. So at the end of the ladder was me looking at them as they inject me. And my hands are getting a little sweaty just as I think about it right now. Like I just felt that little shot of hand sweat, But I'm much better now because I can actually even do it. I mean, there was a time when I just was like, well, I guess I'm just going to die because I can't get that needle thing. But anyway, so me looking at them as they're actually putting it in my arm is like the top of the ladder.
Right.
And where I started was I just thought about, actually it wasn't even needles in the beginning, it was just medical things. I just thought about being in a hospital, I think. I just thought about like being around the possibility of needles, and that would, stress me out. And then, and it was kind of a meandering path, Alyssa, actually, because at some point I really wanted, this was actually during H1N1, and I wanted to get a flu vaccine, because I actually got H1N1, swine flu, 10 years ago or something. And it was pretty bad. I remember just like, whoa, like this is a bad flu. And so I was like, I need to get flu shots because this is like not great. And so I went with Stacy, and she would hold my hand, and I also took some Xanax.
Yeah, why not?
Well, because some people, I think, misunderstand and this is my experience, maybe it's not for everyone, but for me, taking a benzo at these sort of key moments, I have a prescription for a benzodiazepine, and I only take it maybe like once every 3 months or something during events that I think are going to be like this for me. And I think it actually helped, because even though my body is affected by a drug, I think a part of my body is experiencing the stimulus that would usually freak me out, but I'm not freaking out. And then my body's like, maybe I'm not afraid of this thing. And so even though I'm artificially reducing my stress level, I think it actually did help me to propel me up that ladder. Does that make sense, Bob?
It does, but we want to be careful that what you're talking about is a one-off event, a flu shot. If I'm putting a contact lens in every day and I do something that impedes my body's ability to have fear, like take a Xanax every time I do it, I'm actually just going to prolong the fear in the long run. So for one-off, I say Xanax is awesome. If you got to fly every now and again, and that helps. Great, do it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's a good point. So, and it works, Alyssa, because that's how humans work. This is one of those therapies that always works, unless there's some major complication, like you have tremendous anxiety that interferes with this whole process, or you don't have the time or something. But the body habituates. That's what it does. It's sort of like a universal. Humans sleep at night and dream. Humans need to pee, and humans and all organisms that have nervous systems, from what I know, will habituate because it's just the way that organisms are. And so you can bank on this working. And that's what I tell people is like, this isn't one of those therapies where it's just like, well, maybe it'll work, antidepressants, for example. It's like, well, maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. You just have to give it a try, and there's side effects. This treatment has relatively, if not no side effects, because it's just a behavior, right? It's just the side effect of time. And as long as you're good at recognizing your distress level, then you can make sure you don't spike your distress. This does work. And it's worked for me for needles. It's worked for me for claustrophobia. I had a pretty bad episode of claustrophobia in my 20s that I overcame to the point where I didn't want to get into elevators. I didn't want to get in the backseat of a car. I didn't want to sit in the middle of a theater row. I didn't want to. There were various different things, and I still have a little bit of a thing of claustrophobia, but I can get into elevators. I can fly in a plane. I can sit in the backseat of a car. But there was a time when it was really bad, and so what I did is I just slowly exposed my body to the stimulus, and eventually the body's just like, but it's hard to believe, right? You're just like, wait, so there's a version of me that won't be afraid of this? It's a hard pill to swallow, I think, for some people. It doesn't seem real. You know what I mean, Bob?
I do know what you mean. I think, though, one of the things that happens is we don't expose long enough. We have an idea, and the body wants to avoid things that are scary anyway. So I think if there's a difference between people that are successful and then those that aren't, it's how frequently and how concentrated is their practice.
Right.
Yeah.
So you've done this to yourself, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you and me, we filmed it, getting over my fear of heights.
Talk about that. I'm going to sneeze, I think.
Oh, right on.
But tell us about that. No.
Oh,
tell us about
damn. Oh, shit, what a letdown. I teach exposure therapy a lot, and or the principles of it a lot to my students, and I wanted to put my money where my mouth is. And I am afraid of heights, so I climbed out on the roof of my house every day in January for about 10 days straight.
This is 20 years ago.
25 years ago now. Yeah, long time. Yeah. Anyways, every day for about 30 minutes or 40 minutes or thereabouts, and just sat there and looked down. And looked up, too, because I discovered that looking up while I was on the roof of my house was actually really scary. And then you and me, we went to the Aurora Bridge after 10 days of doing that. Now, rain or shine, I was committing myself to it because I know what doesn't work is spotty practice. If I did it once a year, I'd never make a dent in my fear. It has to be concentrated. Oh, and by the way, the effect seems to take place between sessions, not during. So they used to say you got to stay in the scary experience long enough for your fear to drop by half. That was the old wisdom. And now the new wisdom is it doesn't really matter what happens each session. Maybe you leave and your fear is the same as it was when you sat down. As long as your exposure is long enough, then the thing you'll desensitize between sessions. So
interesting.
Yeah, so we went to the Aurora Bridge. That's about 120.
And an element we haven't got into, just to asterisk this, is to try to relax, during these times as well, right?
I never tried to do that. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't know that it has I mean, listen, I'm not an expert in this stuff, and it's been a long time. I don't know that it has a corrective. I don't know that it has an impact on habituation.
Couldn't hurt though.
No.
Yeah. Well, that's what I did for myself, is that for example, if I thought about needles, I would feel my anxiety going up, and then I would try to relax while I'm thinking about needles. I'm trying to, deep breathe.
Yeah.
And you just try to not get all uptight and cause more bad things to be associated with the stimulus. I'm trying to get my body to think needles are okay. So I'm, as I'm thinking, I'm relaxing, and I'm, relaxing my shoulders. I'm, all that kind of stuff. But you're saying that you didn't necessarily do that.
I didn't do any of that. You don't, as long as you're not getting in the way of exposure to the feared stimulus. I think relaxing your body probably makes it more palatable.
Right.
So there is, I believe, this may not be true, but I'm pretty sure it's true, that relaxing after an exposure session has an impact. That's a worthwhile thing to do. So Royal Bridge, we were there for 5 minutes because it wasn't tall enough. So then we went to Rattlesnake Ledge, which is a 1,000-foot cliff, and we sat there for an hour. We were up there. I was 3 feet from the edge, and
for those who don't know, Rattlesnake Ridge, east of Seattle, is, I don't know, like a couple 1,000 feet cliff.
1,000 feet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just straight down.
It is.
Like the Grand Canyon kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, you're looking down at tall trees. You're looking down at them.
Right.
So I sat 3 feet from the edge for an hour, and my anxiety was maybe a 35 out of 100.
Yeah.
Now, the thing about me is,
I think I have pictures of you. I think I have pictures of you just sitting there, like, in this Indian style or something, and just going sitting, and you dragged all of the whole crew.
That's right. Todd was there, and you.
Yeah,
right?
And we just were up there, relaxing while Bob was exposure therapying himself.
Yeah. You were very kind. Let's see. I wanted to say something. It flew out of my head.
You're on Rattlesnake Ridge. You're sitting there.
Yeah. I'm afraid of heights again.
Oh.
But I don't practice. So if I practiced with heights, if it were important to me, it isn't important to me. This isn't a fear.
How does it impact your daily life?
It doesn't. I live in a one-story house, right? So,
but if you're in a car going over a bridge or something, or what?
Nah, that's not that one is not for me a big stimulus. I wouldn't walk over a bridge that was real tall now, but that doesn't really get in the way.
Yeah,
it doesn't interfere with, as they say, social and occupational functioning. So I'm afraid of spiders. I'm afraid of heights. I don't really care, right? The reason to do it was the exercise of it, to walk the path and find out what it's like, and to be able to stand behind this actually does work. It actually works really fast too. This is not a months long thing. This is a days long thing. The clinical trials are 9 to 14 sessions, I believe, for getting over phobia.
Yeah.
So there's every reason to believe that Alyssa will beat this in 2 weeks or less.
Yeah. I had a dream about spiders last night. I just remembered they were getting into my house, and they were those daddy long leg kind of, we call them, and where they're just like a little bean with legs. They don't have a distinctive bottom. A lot of spiders, it's like you see the head and the midsection, but there's a certain kind of spider where they just look like a rock with these long legs coming up. And I saw one, and I had a concrete floor for some reason, and I stepped on it, and it popped like a pop gun. It just went, it went pop, and then I saw another one, and I didn't stomp on it. I just kind of like tapped it and pop, and then the next one I saw, I was like, I'll just pick it up and throw it outside. I picked it up, threw it outside. Anyway. Let's take a break. And
what does it mean, this dream you had?
It's a good question. I think it probably had to do with, I opened the window the other day to get some fresh air, and for whatever reason, this one window right outside were all these little bugs. And when I came back to the window to, I don't know, just because I was nearby, I just saw all these little bugs everywhere. And I was just like, these little flea kind of things. And I'm like, what's going on right outside this window? Because at the other windows, it doesn't happen. And so I got the vacuum cleaner out, and I was trying to suck them all up. They were everywhere, and I closed the window. Something had to do with that. And Stacy, like, she hates bugs, and sometimes I'll just hear her scream, and I'll just come around the corner, and she's like, "There's a spider," and I'm just like, "Oh God, I thought someone invaded the house and was killing you." It's like the way you were screaming.
I have spider wrangle obligation to Colleen. That was part of the deal when we started.
But you have a fear of spiders.
Yeah, but it's not a phobic. It doesn't rise to the level of phobia.
Oh, okay. So you can wrangle a spider?
I can wrangle a spider. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got this. The technology with bug wrangling is, I find, like it's in the 80s. I feel like we can put a Tesla in space, but we can't have a very convenient way to wrangle bugs and dispose of them outside. Yeah. I researched it for a long time because I just felt like, because Stacy, her solution is to either, scream and then I come and deal with it, or if I'm not home or something, she'll get a broom and then she tries to like kill it with the I don't know what you call it. End? No, the broom end, the straw, yeah, the bristle. She tries to jab it, but that doesn't always work because some spiders are more hardy than that, and that just kind of flings them. And then if she flings the spider somewhere else, then she's really screaming. And so I was like, there's got to be some solution. And I researched it for a long time, and I finally got to this one thing, and it's not a great solution, but it's the best one out there, is this, God, what's it called? It's like the bug vacuum or something. But
yeah, I know the thing.
There's an accordion. It looks like a lightsaber kind of, and at the bottom end there's an accordion where you push it all the way in, and lock it, and then when you come up to a bug, you put the hose end and you pull this trigger or something. Yeah. And the accordion like snaps open and all this air sucks it in, and then it catches them in this little grate area. It doesn't, kill them. And then you can take that thing outside and open it up and kind of dump it out. And it doesn't always work. Yeah, something like that. And it doesn't always work though, because the vacuum isn't fantastic, and you have to get kind of a good seal over the bug, and plus as you're going up to the bug might run, right? Because it's like, what's this thing coming at me? So I don't know, I just feel like in 50 years they're gonna have a bug solution, and well, maybe there will be no more bugs because the environment will die, right? but I've grown up with bugs. Like, did you ever, I think we talked about this, you never visited my childhood home.
I've never been there. I wasn't invited.
Yeah, that's so weird. I just find that after, knowing you for 25 years, you never went to my parents' house. It's just bizarre. But anyway, it's in the woods and in Sammamish, Washington. And
has Berto been there?
He has. Of course.
You like Berto more than me?
Yeah, I don't understand why you never went there. I don't get it. Honestly, I think what it is that, well, I don't know, because in the beginning, like when I first met you, we hung out all the time. I just don't understand why you never came to like my mom's birthday or, Father's Day or something. It's just strange, But anyway, so I grew up with a lot of bugs and my bedroom was in the basement, and the basement was like below the ground level. My window was up high and it was at ground level. So.
Oh, really? Your room was in the basement?
Yeah, my bedroom was underground. I was like a hobbit,
Wow, right on.
And my closet was the entrance into the crawl space under the house. And so there's just bugs, slugs and bugs everywhere.
Yeah,
Mosquitoes and spiders and centipedes and potato bugs and just everything. And I went through a period of time where I slept on the floor. I don't understand why, but I loved, and it was hard floor. It was like concrete floor with carpet on top, and I would just sleep on my back on the floor with no pad.
How old were you?
Like 16.
Wow.
I just loved it. I thought it was, I don't know. Would I think I was being tough or something? I just don't understand.
I used to like sleeping on the floor when I was a kid.
Now that would just be
hurts.
That would just be impossible for me now. Like there would just be no possible way. I mean, although I will say that when I was, back before the lockdown and we were at the university, I would sometimes take naps in my office. And sometimes I could kind of lean back in my office chair and put my feet up on the desk and just kind of crunch over and fall asleep. But it never was super comfortable. So sometimes I would wad up my jacket as a pillow. And this floor was really hard. It was that industrial carpet, that kind of thin, real thin, like no padding at all. I would just sleep on my back in the dark in my office on the floor for like 20 minutes and just
sounds great.
Yeah, it was really nice. I could lock my door, turn off my lights, and no one knew I was in my office. And anyway,
my friend David Kersey used to use the PDR, the physician's desk reference, as his pillow. I think that's like probably the best use of the PDR there is. That's a good pillow.
But anyway, so sleeping on the floor and bugs would regularly crawl over me. And one day I felt a little itch on my bare chest as I'm sleeping, and I just one morning and I kind of absentmindedly start to itch it, and I feel something, and it's a big centipede just crawling across my
I don't want to talk about this.
So for me, bugs are not a thing. And
did it attack you? Because they're aggressive.
No. Well, in the Pacific Northwest, we don't have aggressive
and they
centipedes.
Win. They win too. They're aggressive and they win.
No, I don't know. I'm sure in Australia they have centipedes that haul off children and eat them or something.
Goodness.
But in the Pacific Northwest, like we have snakes, but they're not. They're Gartner snakes. Pacific Northwest, we're nice people. We're not mean like Australians. Anyway, let's take a break, and we get back. Let's just do a couple more emails. What do you say, Bob?
I say yes.
All right, we're back from the break. Let's do an OPP, Bob. People who became patrons and have stayed patrons through thick and thin. These people became patrons all the way back in December of 2019. When the virus was but a twinkle in the eye of somebody. I don't know, what's the saying? BPD Pain. This person's name is Borderline Personality Disorder Pain. They're an annual upper tier patron from HK country. Berto, what do you think HK country code is? HK.
Hong Kong?
HK country code. Yeah, that could be it. It is Hong Kong. You're right. Good job, Bob.
Thank you.
Trevor, who is a regular patron from Arlington, Texas. Richard from God Knows Where. Christina from God Knows Where. Jessica from Millbrook, New York. Do you know about Millbrook, New York?
No, I don't know that. That sounds like a rural part of New York, but what do I know?
Hanadi from Ireland? IE? I feel like IE is Ireland. Is it not?
Isn't that Iceland?
No, it's Ireland.
Ireland.
I'm learning. I'm learning.
Nicely done.
Lori from God Knows Where and Tracy from God Knows Where. Thank you for becoming a patron and staying patron all of this time. All right. So next email is patron Kimmy from Utah. She says, how do you support a loved one coming home from a psych ward? I listened to your episode on suicide. My husband attempted recently and is now in a psych ward. How do I best support him when he returns? I understand psych wards are more for a safe place for a person in distress and not for solving the base problem. I'm worried if I don't do this right, he will attempt again. I have spoken with his therapist. He will now be going to AA and Alcoholics Anonymous, and we have a safety plan. I get so much anxiety when he's not around me, and because I was the only one who tried to stop him when he attempted, and I did something by calling 911. What if I'm not there the next time? Bob, right. What would you say to patron Kimmy?
Oh my, I'm so sorry. It is scary. It is so scary. I think you have a right to live with secure knowledge that your husband won't attempt again. And so I would recommend, and it sounds like you already have a safety plan, like a crisis plan. Like what's going to be helpful in, if he ever has those kind of urges again, like what will the plan be to head those off or to mitigate them so that, you're not things don't have to get real dire before anybody does anything. And it's obvious that you need to know that you're safe if you leave the house or leave him alone. You need to know that that's okay, that you're safe, because you can't live on high alert and hope to have a good life. You just can't. So I would be talking with your husband and your husband's therapist about how do I what will help me get reassurance that I'm safe whenever he comes home. It's also not dangerous to talk about suicide. It's not going to make it more likely to happen, and it actually might make it so that your husband feels more comfortable because he knows that you're not afraid to talk about it, and so you might make room for him, and vice versa. So I hope that you actually get to read this email to your husband, because it's reasonable for him to understand what you're facing, what you're looking at, as you are, clearly and obviously supporting him.
Yeah. And also, Kimmy, recognize that you're traumatized by this. This is a massive frickin' trauma to have your loved one, I mean, in any situation of a near death situation, but at their own hands, and terrifying. You were the one that stopped them and called 911. You're the one that saved him. Without you, he would be dead maybe. And in the future, it's logical to think, I am the only one who has the power to stop him from killing himself, because he doesn't have other people close to him. So I am the barrier between him dying and him living. And because he's not the barrier, because he wants to kill himself and no one else is around. The therapist isn't there.
These are the thoughts that you're imagining someone would have.
Yeah, because it's logical to think, okay, great, he's going to come out of the hospital, but it's not going to fix his problem. And he's been in therapy. So, it's logical to think like, he's probably going to attempt again. And unfortunately, Kimmy, attempts are associated with future attempts, and men are particularly lethal when it comes to attempts on average. So it's a real threat. And so, but the thing here, Kimmy, is that you want to, there's so many things to say. One is that it's logical to think that way. It's, of course, you care, and you have some responsibility, but not the entire responsibility. Not as much responsibility as I'm guessing you're taking on, because there's only so much you can do as an outsider. And of course, you care, and you'll do those things. But to think that you are, responsible or all the, that's completely unfair, and it's too much. It's too much responsibility. It'll destroy you is the thing. It's like I've been in this situation before, personally and professionally, and there's so many things to say. Okay, so one path to go down for you, Kimmy, is, I'll just tell you what I do for myself. You don't have to do this, Kimmy, but is I'm sad for someone else, and I'll do everything I can. But at a certain point, I have to kind of draw a boundary for my own sanity. That is like, I care, and I'll do the safety plan, and I don't want to lose this person, but I can't sacrifice my own life on the altar of this person's suffering. I just can't. And so I, for me, would draw, some emotional boundaries at the very least of just being like, well, if it happens, it happens. God forbid. I'll do everything I can, but I can't lie awake at night just perseverating on this thing because I don't have full control. I can't, there's only so much I can do. If the other person really wants, or there's a spike while I'm not paying attention in suicidality, and like, what am I supposed to, I guess I could completely sacrifice my life and just put myself on the back burner for the rest of my life and just follow this person around.
No, you couldn't.
Right. So there has to be some, for me, Kimmy, some acceptance of the uncertainty and of the possibility. I mean, people can die for a variety of reasons, not only suicide. So there's this acceptance of reality and a balance. And it sucks because sometimes what that means is to distance yourself, to maybe pull back a little bit, which is the opposite of what makes sense, right? Because someone's suffering, you're not supposed to pull back. You're supposed to lean in. They need you. And you can be there, of course. And I'm not saying to practically pull back, but think of yourself in this equation, Kimmy. Think of your own emotional well-being, because not only this event would it be just horrific. I've had clients who were traumatized. I had this one client who had a friend who was periodically suicidal and then eventually did kill himself. And I think we talked about that event for 2 years of therapy, of post, PTSD recovery therapy and she wasn't, I can't remember, I don't think she was there, but she heard a description of the first responders, what they saw, and it's kind of burnt in her brain. And she was there like recently, a few days earlier with him while he was talking about suicide, and she was trying to help him. And so it was, it's an awful thing. So don't push that aside, Kim. Tend to that first. You deserve that. I don't know if you're going through that. The other thing I'll say, more practically, is you're talking with a therapist. Keep talking with a therapist, and everyone. The best case scenario, Kimmy, you, his therapist, and him are all, and his sponsor at AA, all 4 people, sponsor, you, him, his therapist, are all, especially over the next number of months, are very frequently checking in about suicidality, even if for 3 months there's been no suicidality, but you're worried, he seems a little down. You ask him, how you doing? In particular, are you thinking about suicide? There's a language, and he is able to say, well, to be honest, it did pass through my mind, but I'm not going to do it. There's a gradation of risk and a way of talking about it and different markers. That's the best case scenario. It depends a lot on him, though, obviously. He has to be able to be open about that. I don't know the status of your relationship, but best case scenario, he's disclosing, there's a conversation around it, and everyone understands, because that's going to be the protective factor. Because if he starts to escalate in suicidality, then everyone understands, here's what we do here, and the therapist develops that. That's their job. They understand all the things that need to be done. The sponsor could be there. It sounds like eliminating alcohol is a part of this. So and I say that because your anxiety is good. It's normal. It's useful. Use that anxiety to compel you to develop that lifestyle where everyone is checking in on everyone's moods, yours included, by the way, and suicidal risk. And then, when this happens, when he's a 3 out of 10, here's what we do. So motivate yourself to get there. Any excess anxiety, I would, talk with your own therapist about. Any final word on that, Bob?
Yeah, I agree with you. It's a dialectic. On the one hand, you can be there and be supportive. And on the other hand, ultimately, that choice is out of our hands. What other people do, is even a spouse, is out of our hands and out of our power. I do think that most people won't be specific enough. Like what are the risk factors to that lead him into having that impulse growing or leading him to take action. It sounds like alcohol is one of the big ones. So if you eliminate that, perhaps that would eliminate a lot of the risk. Who are the treatment team? It's obviously the four folks you just mentioned, Kirk, the person and then their spouse and the therapist and hopefully a sponsor in AA if they get one. Are there others? Are there other family members to involve? Seemed like I had another thought, but I think it flew out of my head. I don't really have anything more to say.
Well, the last little thing I'll say is Kimmy's kind of one of her central questions is like, what do I do? How do I prepare? And I think it could, I don't know, Kimmy, but it could be tempting to fall into a pattern of just wanting to make his life extremely comfortable, just trying to eliminate all stresses from his life. And if that's part of the treatment plan, if that's what he wants, then great. But
well, I don't know. Is that really great?
Well, maybe initially, but eventually he's going to have to figure out how to have a system that is responsive to regular life. And there's just no way around that. And so I wouldn't focus on those things if you're focusing on those things, like how do I make sure that his mom who bothers him doesn't call, just trying to micromanage. I don't know if that's what Kimmy's getting into. I could see that impulse, of course, but
right.
But that's, maybe initially, but that's not the long-term outlook. And another thing I'll say, Kimmy, is with a right treatment team, most people do recover. Most people manage when they have proper treatment with someone that really understands suicidality and all the factors. There's a pretty good chance that they'll survive. So they're not doomed.
I'd say there's a very good chance.
Yeah. And
there's reason to be hopeful here.
Yeah. He went to the hospital, maybe voluntarily, I don't know. And so you're doing everything that would lead to a positive outcome in the situation. Yeah. And if I were the therapist, given the little I heard, I'd be optimistic. I'd be like, yeah, I mean, if his attitude is good, if he's compliant, then I'd say, okay, we'll see how this goes, and let's develop a plan, and let's react accordingly, and let's do everything we can to reduce the factors and address it when, so I would, the risk is if things I would watch out for Kimmy is if he starts to not comply, he doesn't go to therapy, or he starts to hide and isolate certain things. And of course you'd want to contact his therapist right away. But if he's complying and doing everything, then I would say, okay, I think we have a good outcome possibly here. Anyway.
I had one final thought.
Yeah.
It's reasonable to ask him to make a commitment to living and to troubleshoot what factors might arise that get in the way of that.
What does that look like?
I need to know you're committed to living, that no matter what, you're committed to staying in this marriage, because in order to be able to sleep at night and have this feel like a reciprocal relationship, I need to know that. I would need that. Okay, great, I commit. What's likely to come up? What could come up that would get in the way of you seeing that through? Because life happens, and then you're having a bad day. So what could come up that would get in the way? Oh, okay, hiding, drinking, that could come up and get out of the way. Okay, great. What are we going to do about that? about you hiding your drinking, because I'm not going to be the alcohol cops either.
Interesting. So you're saying it's reasonable to be a little demanding, a little assertive about like, hey, I have needs here, and I need you to commit to me that you're not going to do this, because I can't. If you can't commit to me that you're not going to do this, then I don't know if I can do this.
Well, then that's a different limit, right? That's a different conversation. So chances are it's in his interest to do that. I mean, he deserves to have a good life, right? And so this is about him protecting himself too. It's not about you being the suicide, monitor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In your DBT class, do you talk about this?
We don't talk about this specifically in class because it's not part of the curriculum, but it certainly comes up from time to time. Though that treatment was developed to help people who are having trouble with suicide and self-harm impulse. So it's pretty common for individual therapists to work with that and to work with families around that because, really scary stuff. In Seattle, they have a friends and family group, which is like a DBT skills class for people that are friends and family of those who, are having these kinds of troubles and impulses and so forth. I don't know if such a thing exists in other parts of the country. You could check into it. Also, Al-Anon can be a really great resource. One of the things I really like about Al-Anon is the recognition of limits. We can go so far and no further, and we don't want to be the alcohol cops. And so how do we live a life? We're not actually doing that.
Yeah, it doesn't do any good to become someone else's parent, essentially.
Yeah, it does not.
Yeah.
It's not terribly sexy either.
It can make it worse to some extent. At the very least, it ruins our own life.
Mm-hmm.
And to have that support around, it's so easy to kind of fall into that, right? When you're, especially maybe during a quarantine, right? And you're just sitting at home with your suffering partner. It'd be very tempting to become, codependent in that way.
Yeah.
The last thing I'll say is that clinicians out there about suicide, I will tell you that in all likelihood, you have not received enough training and supervision around suicide. It's a very complicated thing. And some of the most important supervisory moments I've had of my life is when I was supervising someone with a client who was suicidal and had a risk. So there's so many emotional ups and downs as a therapist. And there's so many, because, we usually are operating by ourselves. Our client comes into our office, we treat them and they walk out, and we might not even confer, even if we're in supervision, because there's only so much time in supervision. You can't talk about every client. So there's so much of our work as therapists that is completely isolated with no outside support or influence. But suicide is a whole different thing. Like you have to have a lot of perspective, a lot of wisdom to the emotional and professional approach to a suicidal client is one of the most complicated things that you will ever do as a therapist. Do you know what I mean, Bob?
You want to be mindful that you're not doing things that are inadvertently increasing risk or reinforcing risk. Totally,
I guess, number one. But number two is therapists freak the F out.
It's scary.
Yeah. And when you have a scared therapist, then, you'll see some weird behaviors.
Yeah. Right.
Like, for example, a very common one is therapists convincing themselves that their client isn't suicidal and that the client, I'm pretty sure they're not going to kill it. I can't tell you how many times I'd hear a supervisee say like, well, so I have a suicidal client, but I'm pretty sure they're not going to kill themselves. So I don't think there's really a risk. And so I said, well, let's go through the process. And then, because I have a whole system, and I'm like, they're imminent risk. So, they're drinking, there's a gun in the house, they've attempted before, they're talking about suicide, they have no one else in their life, they're angry, they have depression, they're not complying with, there's all these markers, and it's like, well, what's the percentage chance that they're going to kill themselves over the next week? Maybe it's 10 or 20, but still, I mean, it's like, and I can't tell you how many times I'd hear a supervisee, because they don't know what to do and they're freaking out. They're just like, well, I think it's going to be fine. Like he said that he had reasons to live or something like that. I'll be like, well, it's good, but there's too many other factors. Yeah. He has a gun in the house and he drinks like that. And he attempted 3 weeks ago, like he is at the top of the list. And maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit for effect, but, and then I'll have supervisees who will offer to have daily sessions to keep them out of attempting, right? And then they're checking in with their clients Saturday and Sunday, and I'm like, do you want to do that? Is that the style of therapist you want to be? They're like, no. And I'm like, okay, well, so let's talk about this. There's things you need to do, but you don't have to do that if you don't want to. So it's just a very complicated space emotionally and professionally, and the solution is to have a supervisor who really understands and is there for you through thick and thin, that they don't just give you the tagline, that they're just like, well, here, follow the treatment plan, or do you have a safety plan? And they don't provide context. They don't really have a way of evaluating risk factors. They don't have a way of guiding you on how do you talk to your client, because it can be, some clients are compliant, some aren't. And so there are different ways to talk to them, and some clients are histrionic. Some clients are kind of faking it to some extent. And so
I don't know about that. I mean, I suppose that happens, but it's saying that here is likely to increase the popular assessment of how often that happens.
Yeah. Well, at the very least, there are questions for some supervisees that are along the lines of, I don't know how serious this person
100%
is.
100% agree.
Yeah, and how do you evaluate that? Because it could be you have a 13-year-old who is just making stuff up, or it happens sometimes. You obviously don't want to assume that. That's the first assumption, because percentage-wise, it's likely very serious. Even if it comes across as fakery, it sometimes is a way of their communicating, or they're trying to alert you to the fact that, well, kind of last week I was extremely suicidal, but I didn't feel like I want to talk with you, so I kind of want to amp it up this week so you can pay attention to me. Anyway, point is that it's a very complicated landscape. You got personality disorders in there. You got the law involved. It's a very complicated thing. And in my experience, a lot of supervisors don't know what the F they're talking about. That's just anecdotal.
So you're saying vet your supervisor if you're getting help with this. Make sure that they're a person who is in a position to actually help.
Yeah, and if your supervisor doesn't give you, if you feel like you're flapping, because the thing that I do with my supervisees, and is like, this is literally my job. When you have a suicidal client, it is right. It's like number one in my job description, that it's my job to guide you step by step, emotionally and professionally, through this process. And if you don't know what to do, that's my fault. And if something goes wrong and I didn't help you with that thing, then it's my fault. So if you feel like you're flapping in the wind and you don't know what you're supposed to do next, or you feel inadequately guided, then that is your supervisor's fault. It is not your fault. So if your supervisor isn't giving you what feels to be a very solid foundation, find an additional supervisor. That's my point.
For sure.
That understands how to walk through this and doesn't just follow the form, which, and I get it, because, I don't know, wisdom is hard to develop.
Yeah, right.
And I'll say, for me, for the first 10 or 15 years of being a supervisor, I was an inadequate. I mean, I feel like maybe I was 50% there, but I was an inadequate supervisor when it came to suicide. It wasn't until I did a deep dive on it 5-10 years ago that I discovered all the ins and outs. And through that process, I really developed a system. Like I have to I have to go to when I'm guiding a supervisee through suicidal client, I have to go to my notes because it's so complicated. There's research involved. There's a a flow chart of different kinds of things, and there are considerations that you have to ask a lot of questions. You have to, like, how much do you drink? Do you have a gun in the house? Do you have access to a gun? Do you have other means of trying to, you really got to problem solve with people, and so it's hard. And if you're a supervisor with 5 years experience, which, I'd say on average, anecdotally, supervisors of particularly interns are like 3 to 5 years past graduation. And that's just not enough time to know anything about anything in my book. I mean, it's very hard to, have a whole backlog of experience and your own investigations into particular topics to really help a supervisee. It doesn't mean you're doomed as an intern. It just means you might have to have additional mentors. You know what I mean?
Yeah, get more mentors.
Yeah. Anyway. All right. Well, that does it for that episode, Bob. Let's conclude. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself because
you deserve it.